The Canon StarWriter 25 may look like a typewriter, and it can act as one, but for all intents and purposes, this is a computer. It's got a CPU and RAM and ROM, a keyboard, a display, a floppy drive for data storage, and a printer for output. So by the book, this is a computer. It's just a very basic and inexpensive one with limited functionality, designed for and marketed to people who could not afford or did not need a fully fledged personal computer. And the Canon StarWriter was by no means unique. At the time, there was an entire class of devices designed to fulfill that role. Canon referred to it as a personal publishing system, but these were better known as word processors. So this is effectively a single application computer. Its one job is to let you enter text on the keyboard, edit it as necessary with the aid of the small built-in LCD screen, save it to 3.5-inch floppy disk, and provide printed output slowly, but still probably faster than you could type it on a typewriter. Self-contained word processors were first introduced in the mid-1980s, and reviews of them were mixed. Some called them techno-writers because they could do much more than a typewriter, while others referred to them as undeniably retro-tech because they were a lobotomized computer. Nonetheless, word processors gained a foothold in the market, and the early 1990s really were their heyday, right before Windows 3.1 at least gave the veneer of making PCs easier to use. But one thing that makes the Canon StarWriter 25 unique among word processors is how relatively recent of a model it is. It was introduced in 1996 at a price of $249.99, about 3 times the cost of a typewriter, but still much less expensive than buying a computer and printer. The Canon StarWriter 25 includes covers for the printer and keyboard and a flip-out handle, so it is portable, but there is no provision for running it on battery power. It uses a center negative 9-volt DC power supply. It also has a darkness adjustment for the printer, a contrast adjustment for the display, and this knockout plug is probably for an optional modem, which this one is not equipped with. On the other side is the 3.5-inch 720K floppy drive and the knob for feeding paper through the printer, and that's it. The non-backlit monochrome LCD has adjustable angle and can display graphics as well as text. The keyboard is just rubber dome, not mechanical, but it has pretty good typing feel. Although I would have preferred a more traditional layout of the arrow keys and backspace key. My main gripe is that the display cannot show an entire line of text without scrolling side to side unless you go into the settings and turn on what it calls maximum display mode, which does display the entire line of text, but then you lose the formatting of how it's going to appear once it's printed out. And scrolling through the document is rather sluggish, whether you go line by line or screen by screen. It takes a while to update the display. You do get all of the typical word processing features, including margins, tabs, line spacing, and columns, cut, copy, and paste, find and replace, a spelling checker, and a crude print preview to at least see how much of the page your document is taking up. And you get a choice of 3 different fonts, such luxury, as well as bold, italic, underlined, superscript, and subscript, and 3 different font sizes as well as expanded and condensed. Many other Canon StarWriter models contain a BubbleJet inkjet printer, but thankfully for us, so we don't have to deal with a clogged print head and dried up ink, this one uses a thermal printer. It can print directly onto thermal fax paper or onto plain paper using the included ribbon cassette. And the print quality is very good. Not quite laser quality, but definitely far superior to a dot matrix printer. The downside is it's very slow. I timed it as taking about 3.5 minutes to print an almost full page of double-spaced text, during which time the ribbon started to crap out on me and made a valiant comeback, but then gave out for good near the end. The ribbon didn't fail because it's dried up. Thermal ink is already dry. The print head heats it up and melts it onto the page. Or because it's run out, there's still plenty left on the supply spool. The problem is this old thermal ribbon is sticky and it ended up sticking to itself and seized up during printing. I tried to manually advance it, but then the ribbon just snapped and now is completely unusable. Unfortunately, the Canon IR100 ribbon it uses has been discontinued and is no longer available, and the people selling new old stock ones are charging highway robbery prices for them. But like I said, it can print directly onto thermal fax paper without needing the ribbon. So thanks to me having some of that paper, I can continue to demonstrate it. Thermal paper also gives you the ability to print in different colors depending on whatever the color of the dye encapsulated within the paper is, in this case blue. Now I'll demonstrate the typewriter mode, which doesn't quite work the way you think, because instead of immediately typing on the paper as soon as you press a key, instead you enter a complete line of text, during which time you can make corrections on the display, and when you press return, then it prints it out. So it's more like a one line at a time word processing mode. The file management is rudimentary to say the least. When you go to open a file you've saved, it asks you to type in the file name, but doesn't show any of the files on the screen, so you better remember what you called the file. If you guess wrong, it's just going to give you an error message. In the Disk Utilities menu, you can print the disk directory, but that means print as in on a piece of paper, and you can rename, copy, and recover files, as well as initialize the disk. Actually, I take that back. It is possible to get a file directory on the screen, and in addition to the file name, which is case sensitive, you can also type in the date you created the file. That just goes by whatever you type in. This does not have a clock calendar. And you can add a description of the file. So these are all the original owner's files on the disk that came with it. Now here's a look inside. I'm actually recording this part of the video first because I'm the dum-dum who accidentally plugged in a center positive power supply, which caused the system to go dead. Luckily no harm was done other than a blown fuse, which I've replaced back there. The circuit board has a date of November 3rd, 1995 on it. I don't see any battery in here, which is good. It has a piezo beeper. And doesn't it look like just a standard off-the-shelf PC floppy drive? The connections are the same. And yes, that really is just a standard PC floppy drive. It's a Nutronics D357T5 made by Mitsumi. And underneath the printer mechanism are two static RAM chips, which are marked on the board as 256 KPS RAM. You may think they meant to say 256 kilobytes of RAM per chip, but no, it's actually 256 kilobits per chip, so that adds up to 64 kilobytes of RAM for this system. And this large chip here is the CPU. It's marked as T9915. I tried looking that up and I got absolutely nothing. But it's got to be some kind of 8-bit microcontroller chip, possibly based on the Z80. Pulling this whole board out to look at the chip that's underneath may reveal more information about it, but I don't really feel like doing that right now. And over here is the ROM chip. It's marked on the board as EP/mask-ROM 4M/8M, meaning megabits. And considering that the part number of the chip starts with NH8, I'm guessing it's an 8 megabit ROM, which equals 1 megabyte. And next to it is an empty socket labeled EPROM 4M. So that will be an optional addition of a 512 kilobyte ROM chip. And over here is one more quad flat pack chip underneath the board. It's a TD62C805F. It's a driver for a thermal printer. As for getting data off the Canon StarWriter and onto a normal computer, we're actually in luck, because unlike a lot of word processors which used proprietary disk formats and sometimes even oddball disk sizes, this one just uses standard MS-DOS formatted 3.5-inch 720K floppy disks. And in the file menu, it has an option to save the document as a DOS text file. I'll choose this one because it has formatting like underlining, centering, bullet points, and bold text. So I'm curious to see how much of that is preserved. So I'll pop in a blank formatted MS-DOS 720K floppy disk. I'll choose that option to save it as a DOS text file. And you can choose either print image or paragraph. So I'll try it both ways to see how it comes out. You also get a choice of code sets, which is interesting. I know 437 is just a standard MS-DOS American code set, so that's what I'll choose. So I'll try the print image version, saving that to the disk. Okay, thank you. Now I'll choose the other option to save it as a paragraph. So we'll go down there and change that and save that file. Then I'll open these files on a PC and see how they come out. And here on my Tandy 1000, there are the two files I saved on that floppy disk, as well as two system files the word processor created. So I'll try the print option to see how that came out, and that did preserve the centering and the bullet points, but obviously the underlining and bold were lost because there's no way to represent that in a standard text file. Now I'll try the other one, which was in paragraph format, and in that case the centering is not preserved. And on a more modern PC or Mac, as long as you have a USB floppy drive capable of reading 720K disks, some can and some can't, you will be able to open those text files it saves. The Canon StarWriter 25 was ultimately near the end of the line for purpose-built word processors. 1997 was really the last good year for them as a product category. By the summer of 1998, closeout sales had begun, and by the fall of 1998, stores were selling off the remaining few in stock at deeply discounted prices. A word processor like this Canon is unfortunately still stuck in the middle, just like it was when it was new 30 years ago. It's not nearly as capable and fun to use as a vintage computer, and it also doesn't give you the satisfying, distraction-free immediacy and tactility of a typewriter. Although maybe there is something to be said about being able to check your spelling before you commit your words to paper.